Hi there, I'm Mark Levy, your sourdough simpleton, back with another recipe to try on your very own. Now this is going to be a long bake, but it'll be worth it. What we're going to be making today, and tomorrow for that matter, is chocolate croissants, chocolate sourdough croissants that are non-dairy, vegan, and absolutely delicious. I served these at a party and people couldn't believe that they were sourdough, couldn't believe that they were not dairy. So here we go. We'll do the recipe in stages as we go through it, and of course we'll post the full recipe on the website sourdoughsimpleton.com. We're going to begin with 360 grams, and I have this in this, I'll show you here, I have this in the bowl already to save some time. 360 grams of all-purpose unbleached flour. I usually use King Arthur. 50 grams, which is about a quarter cup of sugar. 11 grams, which is about 2 teaspoons of non-iodized salt. That's what's in the bowl right now. To that we're going to add oat milk. And this is a half a cup, or roughly 115 grams, or it's 115 grams, roughly a half a cup of oat milk. And we're going to add our active starter. Now this is an active starter. It's been bubbling for the past couple of hours after being fed for a couple of days. So it's a nice active starter, 240 grams, which is roughly a cup of starter when you do stir it down. This is 100% hydration, which is to say it is half flour and half water. And that's important because that's going to add to the consistency of the dough that we're going to make. Okay. All that is in the bowl. Get every drop of starter in. And now we're going to use the stand mixer and a dough hook to mix this up until it forms a nice dough. That'll take a couple of minutes. And I won't subject you to sitting here watching me for it, so we'll let this go for a little bit, and then I'll be right back with you to show you the next step. Now, if you're observant, you're going to realize I'm wearing a different shirt right now. That's because this segment is being filmed the day after the preparation segment that you are in the middle of right now. The reason for that is that I realized after viewing the footage that I had left something off of the film that you didn't see, or the tape that you didn't see. And that is the addition of the butter, the vegan butter, to the batter mix. For some reason I did it and it wasn't during taping, so you didn't see that. So after you've added all the ingredients that we just went through, the flour, the salt, the sugar, the oat milk, and the starter, you're going to be adding vegan butter, roughly 3 tablespoons or 42 grams of softened vegan butter to the mix as you're mixing up the dough. And when that's all mixed together, then you get your dough and you proceed with it as you will see right now. But that's what is missing from the video that you just saw, and I don't want you to miss that because it's a big step. Okay, now back to the mixing. So we've been mixing now for about a minute and a half, and let's take a look. And you can see that it's beginning to come together into a fairly nice dough. Now we don't want to overmix this, because if you overmix this dough, you develop more gluten. More gluten makes it harder. And we don't want a hard dough, we want a soft dough. So we're going to take this off the mixer now and just use my hand to bring together the rest of the flour in the bowl. And you can see how it looks at this point in time. I'm actually going to put this now on a piece of saran. We'll bring the rest of the flour over. We're going to just gently work this through to incorporate all of the flour into this dough, or most of it anyway. After we get this worked together, this dough will be refrigerated for about an hour to give it a chance to come together. After that, we'll start the process of lamination. For that, you're going to need a couple of sticks of plant butter. I mentioned that we use the vegan plant butter. I use the Country Crock plant butter, which comes in sticks, handles just like butter, works very well for a recipe such as this. Okay, so we're pretty much together now as far as the dough goes. It's a nice, not sticky at all dough. We're going to wrap this up in saran, if I can pick it up. And we're going to put this in the refrigerator for about an hour and a half, just to let it come together. And then I'll be back with you for step 2. So stay tuned. So while the dough is in the refrigerator chilling for about an hour, you have time to do the next step. And that step is going to be called preparing the butter. Okay, butter in quotes, because this is vegan. And we're using this Country Crock plant butter instead of butter. Now, if you didn't want to make this vegan, if you wanted to make this regular, with butter, feel free. Just use unsalted butter for this step instead of the vegan butter. We're going to use 2½ sticks of butter. So I'll take one stick and just cut it in half. And this should be nicely chilled because, well, you're going to see why. We're going to lay this out into a square pattern. We're going to do that by cutting the pieces into strips and laying them out. And then we're going to roll this strip down so we get a square, which is approximately 7 inches by 7 inches. We're going to do that on a piece of parchment paper so nothing sticks, hopefully. And we can actually make ourselves a block of butter. Now, if you were in a bakery and you were doing this, you might actually have a large block of butter that you could use, but most of us don't have big blocks of butter, so we have to use sticks. Another way to do this is to grate the butter. Now, I'm using butter generically here, whether it's vegan butter or real butter. When it's frozen, you grate the butter and then assemble those gratings into a square. I tried that. My arm got tired grating the butter, quite frankly, so I decided to go this way instead. Either way, what you're looking for as an end result is a square of butter, approximately 7 inches on a side, and about 1 centimeter or so thick. So what we're going to do is basically cut this into some slabs. Be careful you don't cut yourself. Helps to have a very sharp knife. Actually, whenever you're in the kitchen, it helps to have a very sharp knife. And get that butter off there. Get that off there. And now we'll lay this together in a rectangular pattern. And see if we can approximate the size that we want. Now, one way to do that, you can see, I'll hold that up a little bit, but I just basically had 2 halves alongside the full ones. And what I did was I cut a piece of cardboard 7 by 7 so I could see that this is about, an inch short in either direction. So it shouldn't be too hard to get this all together. We'll put a piece of parchment over it, take a rolling pin, and we'll bang down a little bit to mush these all together. And then we'll just roll a bit to see if we can get this into a uniform block. Now, if we exceed the dimensions, or if there are ragged edges, just cut them off, put them back, it'll be fine. This is all going to get buried in the interstices of the laminations of our final product. So that's where we are right now. And that's close, and that's close. I think a little bit more rolling will do it. And then when we're done with that, this goes into the refrigerator to chill. And we've got about a half an hour or 40 minutes left on the clock for the dough. And by the time that's ready, this will be nice and chilled as well. So there's our block of butter. And it's just a little bit big, so I'm going to be kind of obsessive and just trim that down a little bit. And take those pieces and put them back inside the butter to fill in the little gaps that are there. We'll then cover this over with our parchment paper, put it onto a sheet pan, and stick it in the refrigerator for the next half hour or so. That will complete step 2. Step 1, that was making the dough. Step 2, that's making the butter. Step 3, that's putting it all together. And that's the real fun part, if you call rolling things out fun. But we'll get together with that when all this is cold in a little while. We'll see you back here for step 3. So we've waited about an hour and a half while the dough chills in the refrigerator, and the pad of butter we've made is still chilling in the refrigerator. And now comes the fun part. We're going to roll out the dough and start the lamination process. So I'm going to reposition the camera and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here we have the dough that's been resting in the refrigerator for the past hour and a half or so. It's nicely come together, as you can see. We're going to take a little bit of flour on the surface and on the dough, and we're going to begin to move it out into a circle of about 10 inches in diameter. So you divide the dough up into quadrants and you just roll evenly across the dough until we get to about a 10-inch circle. Now this pad I have is conveniently marked with inches, so I'll know when we're about that size. You'll recall that the butter that we had rolled out is about 7 inches in size from side to side. So the idea is it should fit nicely on this circle. So we're a little bit shy there on this dimension. One of the tricks of this whole process, by the way, is not to go crazy with the roller. When I did this the first time, I pushed a little bit too hard during the lamination process and actually squeezed the butter out from the laminations. You want to keep the dough as even as possible. You can see it's a nice thickness, and we're going to keep that thickness as even as possible. So we're now at about 9 inches or so, about another inch or so to go. I'm just gently rolling it out to make that big circle. What we're going to do at that time is take the butter and encapsulate the butter with dough. Part of the deal here, though, is every time you do something with this dough, it has to go back in the refrigerator to chill back down again. And if your kitchen is warm, I mean, I'm doing this now in the autumn, but if your kitchen is warm, if you're doing it in the summertime, and things start to get soft, you've got to put it back in the fridge and let it chill back down again. So we're sitting at about 10 that way, about 9 the other way, so a little more rolling will do it. And that should be good. We will now take, I will, you will if you're doing it with me, the butter, put it on top of the dough. And we're going to take the dough and encapsulate the butter. Going to roll that in, roll that in. Could have been a bit bigger, I guess. I think I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. Let's make that a little bit bigger to fully be able to encapsulate the butter. Let's see how that works. Roll that down a little bit. And bring that in. I'm going to play with this until I get it to fit. There we go. And we encapsulate the butter fully within the dough. Then we're going to put it back in the refrigerator. We're going to cover this with some plastic. Cover this with some plastic wrap. Put it back in the refrigerator for another hour to rest, and then we're going to roll it out some more. We'll be back then. So the dough has been in the refrigerator, encapsulated with butter for the past hour. We're now going to unwrap it from the plastic wrap. Sometimes easier said than done. And turn it out on the surface. We're going to flour the surface a bit to encourage the ability to roll this out. And the object now is to roll this out into a rectangle, which is about 3 times as long, but about the same width. So we'll do that by pressing down with the rolling pin a few times to begin to lengthen it, and then gradually roll to bring it out. Now this may take some time, but it's necessary to create the laminations. Once we're out to the full length, a little bit more flour on there. Once we're out to the full length, we'll then fold it into thirds, which will create a square, again, the same size as the current square. So I'll let you watch me do this. We'll speed up the video a bit and put some music under it. Otherwise it gets very boring. And we'll see how it turns out at the end of all this. Basically, as a time check right now, We started this thing out with about a 15-minute mix for the dough, if that long. Then it rested in the refrigerator for about an hour and a half, during which time we put the butter together. And then we took it out, did the first encapsulation, and then let it sit for another hour. So we're sitting about, 2.5, 3 hours now. And we have another several of these rollouts and folds to do. I'll go through that with you as we do them. For right now, you can watch while we gently roll this out. Okay, so we're now about 3 times as long as we are wide. We'll take this half, fold it over like that, this one, and fold it over like that, and that gives us a nice package, which we are going to wrap up in saran. I know I'm off camera here. I'll move it over for you so you can see what I'm doing. We'll take this package, wrap it up in saran. We're going to put it back in the fridge to cool for another hour. So we'll see you back in about an hour. It's been about an hour. The dough's been resting in the refrigerator covered up with plastic wrap. Now, this is the part where we begin creating more laminations, more folds, if you will. And it's really very simple. It's going to happen 2 more times. So we've now got 3 layers here. This is the way we folded it together. We're going to turn it 1/4 turn. Now I'm going to the left. You can go to the right. It doesn't much matter as long as you're consistent. We're going to flour it again. And then we're going to roll this out this way. Again, with the intent being to make this longer rather than wider. And the thing is that now that the dough has been resting, it's easier to roll and stretches much more smoothly. So at this point, let me see here. This is 6 inches wide and it is 14 inches long. So 14 divided by 3 is a little bit less than 6, so we need it a little bit longer, about 18 inches long. So it comes up to be basically a square when we're done. And that's 16 inches. Trying to keep it in frame for you and close to the ruler for me. Okay, that's about 18 inches long. Now I'm going to do this on this side because there's a little bit of leakage underneath and I want to bury that inside. So we're going to go 1/3 of the way in, 1/3 of the way in. Now we have pretty much a square. Now, this gets wrapped up in saran put away to rest for another hour. When I bring it out of the refrigerator, I will rotate again, one turn to the left, and then do this again. Fold it again, cover with saran again, and then put it back in the fridge overnight. So there's one more rollout after this step. Works exactly the same as this one did. And then overnight it will be refrigerated. In the morning we're going to take this out. We're going to cut it in half and make our croissants. So that's it for today's lesson. It's been a long one. It has another hour to go yet before I'm finished, but we'll see how it goes. So here's the dough. I'm going to wrap it in saran, put it in the fridge for an hour, one more rollout, and then we'll see you tomorrow. Okay? We'll see you tomorrow. Well, welcome to a new day. This is the morning after all of the mixing and folding that we did yesterday. And today we're going to actually make the croissants. Overnight, the dough has been sitting in the refrigerator to chill, and now let's proceed with the action. I'm going to show you a close-up mostly of the table and my hands rather than a wide shot so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better on. So here we go. So here's the dough that's been resting in the refrigerator overnight, wrapped in plastic wrap. We're going to take this dough, unwrap it. We can be frugal and save the plastic wrap, and you'll see why in a second. We're going to unwrap this dough. And I'm going to cut this in half. So roughly about there. Use a bench scraper. We're going to cut that in half. Half of this we're going to work with now. Half of this I'm going to wrap back up in the plastic wrap. I'm going to put this back in the refrigerator to stay cold while we're working on the other half. Be right back. So here we have the dough, and you can take a look and you can see the laminations in the dough. I'll show you this close up. So here's a little shot of the laminations in the dough. You can see the various layers with the butter in between. And this is what's going to make the delicious croissant that we're going to be eating in just a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is roll this out, and you're going to roll this way, which is to say with the fold towards you and the cut edge on the side. And the idea here is to roll this out long enough that you can get your 4 croissants from this pastry. And that's going to be about 20 inches. And you want to roll very gently. What you don't want to do is squeeze the butter out or destroy the architecture of this pastry. It's just going to take time to do this, so stay with me. And we'll work some video magic and put some music under it to keep you occupied while I roll this out. A little bit of flour certainly helps that as well. Here we go. So it's important to keep the surfaces floured, because if you don't do that, the dough is going to want to cling to the bottom surface and it won't stretch as well. And you're going to end up putting too much force on it. Also, when you are rolling the dough, this is very cold still from being in the refrigerator. If the dough begins to warm up, if your kitchen is warm, then you're going to want to return the dough to the refrigerator and let it cool back down. We want to try and preserve those layers of butter as best we possibly can. Now, when you've reached the appropriate length, you need to cut off the edges. And I know that seems wasteful. They say this is the baker's treat, actually. You're supposed to cook these up and eat them yourself. But the reason for that is that if you don't cut these edges off, then the edges of the pastry will stick together. and they won't be right. So we end up with a fairly nice rectangle, which is what we want. Now, I'm going to use the very convenient little ruler on the side of this board to measure out, and I ended up at 14 inches, a little bit short, so we'll do these at about 3.5 inches. So that's that one, and that's that one, and that's going to be that one. Okay. Now, over here I have chocolate prepared. I'll show you the chocolate. This is unsweetened, excuse me, this is bittersweet or semi-sweet chocolate, which is non-dairy and vegan to keep in with our theme. And we're going to take 20 grams of chocolate and put it into the onto the edge of our dough. And then we're going to roll this up. Nice and pretty. And put it onto a sheet pan. You can see that. On some parchment paper with the seam side down. Just like that. We're going to repeat this for all 4 of these. Take the chocolate, roll it up, and put it onto the parchment paper. Chocolate, roll it up. Parchment paper, chocolate, roll it up, and onto the parchment paper, which gives us 4 croissants such as that. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of oat milk and brush it. Now, again, if you were not doing this vegan, you could use an egg wash, which is made up by taking an egg or 2, mixing some water with it, a tablespoon or 2 of water. What? You gotta roll a little bit on me there, guy. And that's an egg wash, which helps to give it a nice gleam to the outside. The oat butter, here I go again. The oat milk isn't quite as good as an egg wash, but it will help give us a nice shine to it. The sugars in it will caramelize with the Maillard reaction and give us a nice brown coating. I'm going to do the exact same process with the other half that we put in the fridge. And then this all goes to sit and proof for about an hour or 2, depending on how it looks. We'll probably let this go for an hour and a half or so. It should proof at about 75 to 80 degrees. Not any hotter than that, because if it is hotter than that, the butter is going to start to melt, and you don't want that to happen. So about 75 to 80 degrees, which is room temperature or a little bit higher than that, depending on how your house looks. So this is where this one is now. I'm going to do the other one off camera, and I'll be back with you after these rise for about an hour and a half. We'll see you then. Well, about hour and a half, hour and 3/4 has passed, and here are the croissants now with some rising noted, and we're going to brush them one more time with some of the oat milk to help to give it a bit of a glaze on the outside. We have 8 of these lovelies. And then we have this thing here. And what this is all of those end pieces, the baker's treat, so to speak, with a piece of chocolate that was left over in the middle of it. And that's going to bake up, and I may let you see it, or I may just eat it when it comes out of the oven. The oven is set right now at 375 on convection bake. If you don't have convection, you can certainly use 400 degrees on a regular oven. And they're going to bake for about 15 minutes or until they're golden brown. Now into the oven, and we'll see what happens. Well, after about 15 minutes in the oven, here's the result. 8 beautiful chocolate croissants made with sourdough and vegan and dairy-free as well. And along with that, a little baker's delight that I'm going to eat right after this video is finished. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation here on the Sourdough Simpleton. It's a long one, I know, and it's a 2-day bake, but it's well worth it. Check out the other videos here on the channel, and let us hear from you with your thoughts and your questions about the wonderful world of sourdough baking. This is Mark Levy, your Sourdough Simpleton. Please do subscribe to the channel and visit us again real soon. Thanks for coming by.